A warm welcome to everyone to this AOEC webinar. We're just going to allow a bit of time for people to enter the room. Just so that everyone is aware, the session is being recorded and will be available after we've finished the session. So hopefully that gives an opportunity to listen again. I can see that people are still arriving. So a very warm welcome to you. My name is Karen Smart. I'm head of consultancy here at AOEC, and I help support organisations as they bring about cultural change using coaching approaches, using coaching skills. I'm delighted to welcome three eminent guests this morning. We have Angel Conley from Baringa Partners, and I'll ask each of them to introduce themselves in a moment. Also, Denise Alexander from S3 Recruitment and Paul Williamson from ATG Entertainment. All three have interesting and compelling stories to share of their journeys, both individually with their coaching and organisationally, in all that they have achieved with the organisations that they serve. So just a reminder that the session is being recorded, and we are going to be taking questions. So at the bottom of your screen, on my screen, it's 4 little icons along. There's a question mark with a Q&A button. So as you're listening to our guests, please do feel free to ask questions. I have support from lovely Lee, our marketing executive, who's working in the background, and she's going to help me keep on top of your questions as they arise. So the theme for today is all about coaching and management. And so the topic is, why do organisations need coaching managers? Before we get into that, let's hear from our guests. I'm going to take you in alphabetical order. So Angel, let's start with you. Please introduce yourself.
Thanks, Karen, and hi everybody who's listening. So I'm Angel Conley. I look after our leadership development at Baringa Partners. We are a management consultancy, global management consultancy of about 3,000 people worldwide. And I have been working at Baringa for the last 4 years and working with the AOEC on our internal coaching program. And been a recipient of coaching and worked in many different organisations where I've had the pleasure of it being a ingrained part of how we work and manage and develop people, to other organisations where it's a blank sheet of paper and we're setting it up from the start, which has brought loads of different experiences with it.
Thanks, Angel. That's lovely. Let's hear from you, Denise.
Hi everyone, and thanks again for the opportunity to come along and talk with you today. So my name is Denise Alexander, and I'm the Global Head of Learning Design and Organisational Development at S3 Recruitment. It's a STEM recruitment company, if anyone's not heard of S3, and I've now had the pleasure of working there for nearly 2 years. Before joining S3, I dedicated, and I say the word dedicated, over 26 years to NatWest Bank, or RBS as I would fondly call them, honing my skills around leadership and development, and really my passion for learning and development was the core of my own professional journey. And I do firmly believe in the transformative power of coaching and what that can do for an organisation, having experienced that there. I also hold the Advanced Practitioner Diploma in Executive Coaching, which I really do feel has equipped me around facilitating growth and change within myself and the organisation that I now work for. And I do think that delivering large-scale transformation, when we think about what coaching can do, really embodies the purpose of that, and it really can align with your organisation's strategic direction. So delighted to be here today and hopefully can share some really interesting insights. Thanks, Karen.
Thanks, Denise. And last but not least, Paul, please introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, my name is Paul Williamson. I'm the Group Head of Talent Development at ATG Entertainment. I've worked for ATG for 27 years now, so I started off as a box office assistant, my first job out of university, and stayed with the business, because I love theatre as a medium. But as I grew in the roles within ticketing, I realised and moved into management particularly. I actually struggled with that transition from going from selling tickets to being a manager of people. And a big moment for me was attending a coaching, like a 2-day coaching program in 2006. So it was a very long time ago. And it was such an epiphany, that moment, to suddenly realize that I didn't need to carry all the answers myself. And this idea of asking questions and actively listening to people, it was just like a breath of fresh air. And it opened up so many doors for me. I moved into HR. And then got interested in how we prevent issues from happening in the long term. So really getting to people with timely training around management skills. And then further down the line, we started to develop leadership development programs, starting with Rising Stars, a program for emerging leaders. And that's when I first met Karen, who we brought in the AOEC to run a certificate program for a group of managers to support our leaders. And it's grown from there. So we've got 5 really great leadership programs that we've run as part of ATG's L&D offering. And the golden thread running through all of that is coaching. And we've now got to a point where we've got a coaching faculty as well. So we're able to offer internal coaches to our developing leaders and beyond within the organisation.
I think it's probably fair to say, thank you, Paul, that that listening to you all, you're serving organisations that are at slightly different stages of development with coaching, and it's really interesting to hear what that brings, both for you as individuals, but also for the organisations that you serve. I wonder whether you can give us a flavour of, I guess, the cultural impact that developing your managers to use a coaching approach has really helped, and in certain cases senior leaders as well. So who would like to start with that?
I can talk a little bit about what we've done. So we 4 years ago we started off on quite a bold plan to put all of our partners through an exec coaching diploma, and we've come to the end of that now. So we've got about 97 internal coaches that, and what they do is they support our talent pipeline of our future leaders coming through. And the impact of that from like the first couple of years has been really our partners, well, a few things. It's helped them really hone their leadership style and approach. It's given them a toolkit and a way of working which was in some cases new and different. But as Paul mentioned, I was really smiling, Paul, when you was describing the epiphany moment, because I had the same thing of not having to have all of the answers and just really thoughtfully asking questions and listening and empowering other people. It's ever so satisfying from a personal perspective, but also seeing them flourish is amazing. So there's been some of that with our leaders going through the program for themselves and the teams that they lead. There's also a cultural impact in terms of it really helps us to underpin our unique culture at Baringa, which we're very proud of. It's a great place to work, and that's lived and breathed through our consultants and how we work together and how we collaborate as well. But it's also enabled them to have a strengthened network. So as you can imagine, with a large partnership, not all of them know each other. So it brings people together and they can share their stories and support each other in a different way, which has been really powerful throughout the whole of the programme.
I think that's inspiring, and I guess one of the elements that supported you was having a senior partner or managing partner.
Our managing partner, yeah.
Who really was at the vanguard of leading the way and supporting the wider business to do that. I
Yeah,
might come back to that because I'm conscious that
fine.
we'd like to hear from Denise, but I think there's a bit of a dynamic tension between, you know, having a senior leader who has a vision for a way forward and then allows that vision to grow in a coaching way rather than in old style, slightly imposed way. I think there's that coaching is a bit of a conundrum in a sense from that perspective. But I would lovely to hear from you, Denise, about what you're doing at S3 and some of your previous experience with the bank and how you're putting that forward.
Brilliant, thanks, Karen. So, you know, I think having come from an organisation that really, got to a point in its kind of journey, if you want to call it, where they had to reset completely. And I'm thinking about the time of the banking crash when the bank realised that the strategy had to change. I think in being part of, thinking about new leadership programmes, how we approach sales, how we deliver service to our people, and how we coach and actually start to, embody a coaching culture. What that's done for me is given me the backdrop and the understanding of potentially how to tackle that at S3. So just to give the difference, S3, a very young company, so just about sort of 25, approaching 30 years, 3,000 employees versus 60,000 employees. But with the view that, coaching, they think they're coaching. And I think we've all experienced that with people who think they're coaching, when they want 5 of these and 10 of these and they want them tomorrow, versus the wonderful way that we can approach it through having those really valuable conversations, but with a very appropriate structure so that we really hear from our colleagues and we understand and we listen, and all the good things that coaching brings. So again, thinking about the values of S3, really thinking about the behaviours that we want to see, having coaching as an underpinning piece to that, and helping our senior leaders see the benefits that can bring. And this is where my experience from the bank allowed me to evidence this. But I think being part of something, and such a large scale, and then thinking about, the potential that we could have there with 3,000 people and the right way to do it really helped me start that journey. So as I say, I'm only 18 months down the line there, getting there, but you're right. I think when you talked about that, tone from the top, the leadership, your exco, the people you need to influence, that's currently where I am just now, and we're on that journey. But it's always good to reflect back and think about what worked, what didn't work, what would we do differently, and the usual types of questions that you ask. But like that, I'm always open to what's new, how can we learn from others, and how can I take that forward. But very much at the beginning of a journey, which tells me it's never too late to start. Never too late to start.
And I think touching on definition of what coaching actually is, are we actually talking about the same things? I know this from my own experience. I joined the AABC basically as a self-employed person coming on the practitioner diploma, freely saying, yeah, I'm a coach, I've been a coach for years, and then like, oh, actually I might be doing something else, or a hybrid mix of things. So I think that really resonates. So let's come back to ambassadors, Paul. 10 years in, what
Well, if I reflect back, I think that the impetus for starting this work was at a point, and of course the organisation's evolved hugely since then. But at that time, it was founder-led. We were curious about where our future leaders were within the organisation. So it was very much driven about emerging leaders and finding the leaders of tomorrow. It was really interesting because the Rising Stars programme runs for 2 years. I, from my personal experience, knew I wanted a coaching element as part of it. And we also wanted to teach coaching skills as part of that leadership development. But the first step was getting a group of more seasoned managers to kind of engage, first of all, get interested in coaching, learn those skills, and then support those emerging leaders along the time of the program. What was so interesting is I remember, Karen, you came in and ran a taster session. So this was an organization that didn't really understand what coaching was. And Karen just ran a very simple exercise, you know, the 5 minutes of listening and not saying anything, and then repeating back what you'd heard, which was so simple. But just the reaction from that was incredible. The idea that, oh my word, I had a bit of an epiphany, and it was only 5 minutes. So it was really interesting, that idea of just whetting people's appetites around the subject and getting a proper demonstration of how this stuff worked. I remember had a almost instant impact. And then if we fast forward 2 years later, at the end of the program, we ask our participants to present to an invited audience of family, friends, but also senior managers within the business about their leadership journey, talking about what they've learned and what kind of leader they're going to be. And I tell you, to this day, it's my favorite day of the year, and it's one of the most inspiring days of the year. But what it did was really create an appetite in the wider business for learning and development and coaching, because people could see the impact that it had, because people were standing there, you know, holding space, being their authentic selves, and just they had the audience in the palm of their hands, really, from the very first time we did it. And what then happened quite organically, that was people were coming to me and saying, oh, Paul, I want to learn how to present like those. Your emerging leaders, that is fantastic. I want to be able to learn how to coach. I want to do this. So it was really interesting, because received wisdom would have you believe you have to start at the top and work the way down. And actually, we've done it completely back to front, i.e. we started with emerging leaders, and then we created an appetite through the organization, through almost show and tell. And also we started to notice as well the confidence in these emerging leaders when they were then going into meetings, how they were holding themselves, how they were communicating. It was really noticeable. And that did us a huge benefit in terms of promoting what we wanted to do going forward. So when it came to running Leading Lights for our senior leaders, which is the next development program we started to run, a lot of the argument had been won, if you like, and the case had already been made for the impact of coaching and leadership development within the organization. But prior to that, we didn't really do much at all. It was more around quite practical management skills.
So clear integration. Yeah. What are the two of you as you listen to that story, Angel and Denise?
I like what you were saying, Paul, around the experience. Once people actually get into experiencing coaching and understanding what coaching is and isn't, which I think we probably have all experienced, that a lot of people think they know what coaching is, and actually it's something quite different when you get into it. It sells itself. So we've had a similar thing with our directors and senior managers wanting to learn how to coach, develop their own coaching skills, using it with their clients, our partners using it with clients as well, but also with each other. So a lot of what we do is around giving our consultants skills to work with clients for our client work, but it has an impact across the business as well. So it's been a really interesting journey, that the advocacy that comes with it as people experience coaching. But also, I think it's important to be clear around the different types of coaching as well, because there's sometimes a perception that coaching has to be executive coaching. It has to go through a series and quite a structured program, when actually you can use the skills in the moment, day to day, without having that more formalized process, and it still be really impactful and really powerful.
Isn't that what modern day management is all about, really? Yeah. I can see you nodding, Denise.
I wrote down the words that Paul had used around authentic self, and I thought what resonated really well there was the presentation piece, how people almost probably, I think, would have felt, you know, the vulnerable when they told their story, you know, and they're sharing that with others. And that's the type of leaders that we need, right? We need the people that are going to spend the time, connect, share a bit about themselves, be open to what colleagues want to share back. And I agree with you, Angel, whether that's in that formal setting or whether that's day to day, what we need to do. I think we need more of it in that informal setting. And the more we can get people comfortable with that, it feels it's more about building trust, and what better way to build trust than to spend time with people and give them the opportunity for us as leaders to listen.
And it's that curiosity, isn't it? And you mentioned earlier around having a really good conversation, and that curiosity that comes from coaching and asking questions and just listening helps to build all of that trust and the relationships that is going to unlock people's performance.
That sounds good. I think we're talking a lot about the good things that happen, but obviously there are some challenges that coaching can bring as well. What sort of thoughts do you have around what might be difficult within organizations?
Karen, I'll pick that one up just with the simple answer. I think with most of these things, it will come down to time. People will use time as the biggest barrier, whether it's time to plan to have the program, or it's time to actually facilitate the coaching itself, or if it's, we've got other priorities. I tend to find that coaching, one-to-ones, or the people part would be the first thing that some leaders would choose to step over. When actually it's the one thing that we should as organisations prioritise. And I think that shifting the mindset around that can be quite a challenge. And I think the more that we can spread the word that actually stick to those things, then actually things like performance priorities, project deadlines can actually be achieved through that mechanism rather than it being stepped over. So I think that for me tends to be quite a substantial barrier, and probably used more than most.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that about the perception about it takes too long to coach. Interestingly, from that early example of just the 5 minutes,
5 minutes.
you could quickly bust that myth, I think. I think also it can create a bit of an existential panic in some people, because if their whole identity and their definition of a manager and leader is around directing, telling and fixing, it then becomes really difficult for, well, if I'm not directing, telling and fixing, what am I supposed to do? It's like, oh, you might have this existential crisis at some point. But I think that what we've found from the experience of kind of taking people gently through these techniques and understanding is that actually it opens up so many more avenues. I mean, if you've got a group of 10 people in a room together, doesn't it make more sense to mine the 10 people's experiences and all the creative and resourcefulness that they bring, than just assume that you have the best answer because you've got the title? And I think that's the beautiful thing about coaching. I think it allows you to challenge some of these really old, outdated views of what a manager and a leader should be, and what you should be doing as a manager and leader. Because to my mind, the way forward is to, harvest all this creativity and engagement. And that's not just going to affect your ability to come up with a better solution. It's also going to create better engagement within teams, so people are much more likely to enjoy coming to work, enjoy engaging with their colleagues. It will help with things like retention, because suddenly the world of work becomes a place to have fun, dare I say, in the work itself. So I think there's so many benefits from taking on coaching within an organization, but some of it is about busting those popular myths that we might have either consciously or unconsciously taken on from when we were growing up. And often it does come from our formative years as well.
That's quite funny. You talked about directive leadership, and my big dog started to woof at that point. I think that what you might be referring to is something around psychological safety, and this idea that actually being whatever level you have within an organization, being asked your opinion makes you feel valued. It makes you feel more confident, and it makes it more okay for you to express your view, as opposed to being one of the silent nine in a room of 10.
I think being asked and also being listened to makes a huge difference in, psychological safety and the diversity of thought around having those ingredients towards having high performance in an organization is incredibly valuable. And and that comes from curiosity and just being inquisitive around what people are thinking and want to share and know about a particular subject or a challenge or a problem is incredibly powerful as well.
And
We're starting to collect some questions. So we've got one, which is, what do organisations look for when bringing on board a coach? Now, it's not clear whether they mean an internal or an external coach, but perhaps I can put that out to the three of you quite generally.
I work with a number of external coaches. They've worked with us for a number of years and understand our culture, how we work, what we're looking for and our values. So I think it's really important when I'm meeting with executive coaches that they fit us culturally, and they understand what we're about, what we do and our values, and they can bring that to life. Because we've got a long history with the coaches that we work with, they get it, right? They understand what we do, so that works really well. But when I'm meeting with new potential external coaches, obviously the usual credentials, what's their coaching approach, how do they deal with boundaries, accreditation, qualifications, etc., how they go about managing their own coaching practice with supervision is really important as well. And then we talk about kind of their programs and what they offer and the frameworks that they have.
I think that's really important actually for internal and external coaches, is that idea of support and supervision. I think it's essential and something that sometimes organisations overlook when they start getting into having internal pools of coaches.
Confidentiality is so important.
What sort of support do they need, and exactly that with confidentiality.
Yeah, I'd echo that. We've set up a supervision group, so all our internal coaches get regular supervision mixed with a bit of CPD as well. So it's keeping people's skills up to date and introducing some new ideas. So then we can invite some other practitioners in to look at different areas of coaching. And I think that's really important to keep people practiced, but also sharing those experiences, because you learn so much from hearing other people's experiences out in the field, as it were.
How about you, Denise?
I won't repeat anything that's been said, because I think it's, absolutely agree with both what Angel and Paul have said there. And experience from an S3 perspective, we're not at that stage, but from the bank before, we grew into that process where we learned that we needed to have supervision and people supported, and we followed that model. And I think that's when we realised that actually it's not a one and done, this is a continual to look after. So that would be my view on that. What I have done at S3, however, for our groups of people that have experienced the kind of basics of the certification, for example, of coaching, we've got in-house community of practice where they get to work with the peer group that they attended that course with. And that gets really good feedback, where they're just able to come on, be honest, talk to each other about what they've been doing, what have they learned, who's tried what, who's experimented, are people really taking that time to hold the silence? And it's working really well. So quite informal, but something that I knew right away that you can't just do even just the basics and leave it. We've got to give some people the space to continually learn with others in the same position. So that would be my kind of
Mm. There's something about consistency, isn't there? That, you know, it's not just a one and done. You've got to sort of think of them almost as a living, breathing entity that requires ongoing support and encouragement and development. And that's certainly, you know, what I see within your organisations, that, you know, that marks you out. So there's another question. Are the training and development courses developed with the organisation or the coaches training programme that is delivered? I think that might relate to you, Paul, because I think you were referring to your leadership and management development programmes. Are the training and development courses developed with the organisation or the coaches training programme that is delivered? I wonder if the person that asked that question could give us a little more context. Might be helpful.
I mean, basically, one answer around that is so the programs are all internally created. But with external facilitators who come in. The early edition of the program I was talking about, we also used the Academy of Executive Coaching to run a program for us to upskill our managers in coaching skills. So it's a kind of hybrid between bringing in external resource and creating our own programs within the organization.
Yeah. And actually thinking back to those days, that's quite a long time ago that we did that with you now, but it has laid the foundation for you to have eventually an in-house coaching cohort, so your own internal coaches.
Certainly, and I think there's a union between learning coaching skills and developing yourself as an L&D practitioner in coaching skills, and how that then translates into the work that you do yourself and the design work. I mean, I'm struck by the number of things you learn when you're learning individual coaching and how applicable it is in other situations. So we talked about psychological safety earlier on, for example. Well, the best way to create psychological safety is to contract. We know that when we're doing one-to-one coaching, but I do that as part of every single L&D event that we run. So you contract with a group to say, you know, how do we want to work together? How are we going to deal with disagreements, things like that. But just imagine, though, in the course of ordinary life within an organization, how useful that would be if we contracted before meetings, before massive projects. How many issues we could just prevent, actually, by talking about that up front, so that we can then also empower people to share what's going on for them during the course of a project or a meeting, to actually say when you've got concerns rather than not say anything at all, potentially because of the seniority within the meeting. So there's lots of things, I think, that coaching as a philosophy, if you like, can contribute to organizational life. And that's why it is so important that managers and leaders get on board with this, because I think it can deliver so much more than you first anticipate.
Yeah, and I think that I've heard one of our coaches say of another organisation that's not represented here, if you can't do what you want to do, start with you, you know, develop yourself. And certainly what you're saying resonates with my own journey of training as a coach here at the AEC, and letting go of so many learned ways of showing up and feeling the need to know everything, and actually that humility of curiosity instead of feeling a pressure to know the answer is really powerful. I can see you nodding, Denise. I don't know whether,
I'm just
more at the beginning.
I'm agreeing with the statement because you're so spot on. I'm a great believer, particularly with coaching and leadership, that you can lead and coach anything. You do not need to be the expert. And I think when people get really comfortable with that and they're surrounded by the people that can do, you can achieve great things. And I come from that bit of experience, being asked to maybe perhaps go and do something that I thought, I can't do that. Are you kidding? And going with the view of actually taking, that view of, Denise, do you know what? You can lead anything, you can support, but do it in the right way, and you can achieve what you need to achieve. So I would encourage people to think about it also as an opportunity to grow, to learn new skills, but by using those around you to actually become an even better leader than perhaps you would have been. So your words just struck with me, sorry. Hence the question, but they struck.
So we have more questions coming up. So what do organisations fear from bringing in coaches? And this is a friend of mine, Jay, actually. Hello, Jay. She's asking, I'm wondering why more organisations don't take this approach or a requirement of their managers and leaders. So what do organisations fear from bringing in coaches?
Karen, I'll add a bit from what my experience, obviously, with my new organisation. I think it's a lot of the simple stuff around the fear of change. I think about doing what they've always done when it's always worked. I think I mentioned in our earlier chat, I'm relatively new to S3, but the recruitment industry itself is going through quite a difficult time at the moment. And actually, coaching and cultural changes is one of what I would think is the things that could really steer the ship in a different direction, or it could be a unique piece for S3 to really embody coaching and what that can do to help performance. But when people have not experienced something, I think that itself becomes the fear of, I'm a leader, I'm a manager, I can do that. Or as I said earlier, I already know how to coach without having a true understanding of what coaching means and how best to go about it. So I think there's just always that fear of the unknown. And particularly for organisations, I think, that are going through huge amounts of changes, which most are at the minute, whether it's technologically, whether it's people, whether it's performance. I think we're all heading into some big things, and perhaps not knowing or not experiencing that actually coaching can make a difference.
Anything to add, Paul, Angel?
I think sometimes with bringing in one-to-one coaches, maybe external coaches into an organisation, there's a fear that sometimes people think they'll get some coaching and then leave. I've certainly come across that before. However, what I would say is, that is the old argument, isn't it? And it's often put about learning and development as well.
Yes.
Like if we invest in everybody, what if they leave? And it's the old response was, well, yeah, yeah. What if we don't do it and they stay?
Yeah.
I mean, you don't get any incremental change. You don't get any benefit from or enhanced performance at all by not doing it. So I think it's a bit of a moot point, really. So because I've always seen it's had tremendous benefits, and even if just through the course of a few coaching sessions, somebody can make a really massive contribution to the organization and then leave. But it's almost been worth it for that contribution they've been able to make through the power of coaching. So that's one thing that I've experienced, I think, along the way.
Well, earlier we spoke briefly about authenticity, and sometimes people show up at work and they're not really able to be who they really are, because who they really are doesn't really fit. And so it takes courage, and if coaching can be part of that courageous journey to help someone elegantly exit from a role that isn't really suited to them, I think that has to be a positive thing. So what is the solution for business and organisations that do not have the budget to bring in coaching skills? Well, that's always a bit of a thorny issue. What suggestions would you have there?
I think in previous organisations where there's been more challenge around budget, your L&D team has some of the skills to be able to impart and design a coaching program that you can run in-house and develop yourself, which is, you know, if you've got an L&D function. If you don't have an L&D function, I'm probably a bit out of ideas there, but I think your L&D and your HR team are a good source of skills, insight and knowledge to be able to put something together that would give you the basics of coaching. So it doesn't always have to be an exec diploma or an expensive external program, right? But it depends on I do honestly believe it really does depend on the organization, the organizational needs and how it operates, and in terms of what's needed for the people that are involved. So that would be where I would go. Look internally for your sources of information and knowledge and be able to create something unique to you.
Well, that very simple session that I did for Paul, if there are any organisations out there listening who want a very low cost way of getting an insight into what coaching is and to get some, even just a 5-minute practical experience, I'm really open to doing that work, because apart from giving someone a sense of what coaching is, it also helps organisations to be more informed, if it's new to the organisation.
And there's a wealth of resources that are out there that are available as well, that you can tap into. And sometimes it's, I mean, to Paul's point, a simple demo where you did a 5-minute exercise to just bring it to life for people is enough for people to go, oh, right, yeah, I get it. I can see how this can work and I can see how I can do it. It makes it really achievable for everybody.
And it's creating those advocates, isn't it? So, and that very much becomes a ripple effect. I think as soon as people start to see it in action and being enacted, it does create ripples, and it does affect other people, and other people get on board, and it grows from there. But I think it's being judicious in terms of the money that you spend. I think if you've got a limited budget, I mean, I think it's unfair to say you're not going to be able to do this without any budget at all, I don't think. Or, well, you can make a start, but I think you do need some budget to be able to spend to do this well. Because you don't want like the Wild West of coaching, which there's an element of that out there where, somebody calls themselves a coach when they're really not. So I'm an advocate for doing things and getting the proper backing and training in order to do that. But you can do that wisely. And if you get one person qualified within your organization who then designs the materials, I think that's a great start. And then you can create things that are really cost-effective way and grow it like that. But it's what you spend and how you spend it, I think, is important, and make some good decisions around that. Because you don't have to buy everything in, but if you invest in people, that's the best way of doing this. So you've got somebody who truly understands within your organization, is passionate about it, and will then create those ripples. But it has to start from somewhere.
I agree with everything you said, and I think there's something that I've seen you do at ATG Entertainment that's that ongoing commitment, the consistency, that it's not just a one-shot wonder, we've invested in this and that's it. I've seen you judiciously invest year on year, and I'd almost flip the question around the other way and say, a bit like that thing about learning and development, and they leave. If as an organisation you don't do this, the impact of that going to be for multi-generational working, for ongoing employee engagement, presenteeism, hybrid working? There's so much complexity. How are you going to cope with that if you're not equipping managers to have meaningful and curious listening and questioning based conversations? I think that will be challenging. Someone's asked about, actually relating to that, Christina has asked, what role does emotional intelligence play in being an effective coach manager, and how can it be developed?
Well, for me, that's fundamentally important. We spend a lot of time looking at developing emotional intelligence, certainly within Leading Lights, one of our programs, that is the whole, we have a whole residential week where we look at emotional intelligence in different forms related to different subjects, and guest facilitators come in and focus on that. And it's this idea also of, you really need to know yourself, certainly as a manager and leader, and what your triggers are and how your behavior might alter under pressure. So so that you, and particularly the more senior you get, because the more authority you have within your role, the less likely it is that people challenge how you show up. And if that happens over a period of time, and certain behaviors become commonplace, that's when you're much more likely to have a danger of having a toxic workplace, actually. So for me, it's fundamentally important that all our leaders understand emotional intelligence. They are self-aware enough to realize when alterations are happening, when they're going into high stakes, for example. So we do a lot of work around that, using models like structural dynamics, for example. So for me, that's incredibly important. It features in all of our leadership development programs.
Thanks, Paul. How about within S3?
So I think Paul's made a great point around the whole piece, but I think the other factors that make it so important are things like remote working and people having to lead and manage through different platforms. I think we've got the piece of, quite a few of us are working globally now. So when we're working with people from different countries, different cultures and time zones, emotional intelligence for me becomes almost, it's got to be a given, because if we cannot connect with our people, if we don't understand and are able to support them, then the implications of that really run quite high risk for the organization. And therefore, to Paul's point, we need to spend the time on it, we need to understand it, and we need to really drive it forward. So very much key, Karen, I think, to that future piece. But I think there's so many new dynamics now affecting us as leaders that we really need to be on top of it.
And that's a key point, isn't it? Particularly in these recent times, how divisive the world is becoming. I think coaching skills are going to become more and more important to have difficult conversations within organizations as they arise. So we're doing our managers a disservice, I think, if we're not opening up their experience to be able to not just understand themselves better, but to be curious and empathetic to their teams, to be able to hear difference and allow it in spaces so that it can be worked through rather than become conflict.
Just looking at time, and we've got a couple of questions left, but I'm also conscious that I wanted to ask you your thoughts on the future for coaching. I know before we started, Denise, you were talking about some of your experimentation with technology. It would be great to share from all of you your thoughts about that, about what the future holds and the role that technology may play.
Yeah, so just to share, so obviously with working with S3, and we predominantly recruit STEM, so we've got some access to some colleagues, employees that are particularly interested in new technologies and AI, etc. So what we've been experimenting with, in the first instance, it was role play for an induction program, so getting our new employees comfortable with dealing with difficult situations, you know, conversations around particular points in our process that we felt, you know, people needed a safe place to practice, etc. But we got curious again to say, you know, could this AI help us from a coaching perspective? Does it have the capability? And that's the space that we're in just now. So we're really looking at what can that give for leaders and managers when they're dealing with you know, difficult conversations. It could be one-to-ones, or it could be you practicing those open questions, holding the silence. But the great thing is the AI itself can give feedback, and it gives it really quickly and in real time. So experimenting, Karen, working with it, you can almost see where the future's going with this. And a bit scary, to be fair, as well, but it does take away from that need to do it one-to-one with, you know, with a person, where you can almost start to hone your skills before perhaps you get into that situation with the individual or with your manager if they're coaching you. So it just gives that opportunity. So early days for us, progressing well, but there's a lot of interest. I've got to say, it has motivated and interested our colleagues, and that they want to access it, they want to be curious about it. So so I'm happy to keep people posted on that one, but it's certainly an area of, you can see it's going to grow. Even the technology that we've been using, it feels like every kind of 2-3 weeks there's an update or there's something else that it can do. So it's moving really fast, moving really fast.
Wow. And that could also help with the budgetary constraints
Absolutely.
as well. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, Angel.
Yes, we're probably not as far down that line as you are, Denise, but we're starting to explore what this could look like. So we're going to be implementing some technology to help us manage the coaching process. So we do about 100 coaching connections in a year, and that will help us kind of automate some of that work we do up front of introducing people, chemistry meetings, making sure that coaching connections are starting and ending, and all of that good stuff in between, capturing feedback and giving us some data and insights that currently is we manage manually. So early days on that. So again, happy to keep people posted on what we're doing.
Thank you. That's interesting, and I can imagine that sort of saves your internal resource as well. That's
going
to be a help.
idea is going to help save me a lot of time, Karen.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes. And me. We've got a question from Zahida, who mentions about the experience, how to give coaching the best chance of success, and the example she's citing is people who are sent for coaching. So how should organizations optimize for success?
So we have a framework and a process around coaching that we follow, and I spend quite a bit of time meeting with people who put themselves forward for coaching to talk through the difference between what coaching is and what it isn't, explaining what they're going to experience in each stage of that process, and talking them through what to expect from a chemistry meeting and through the coaching experience themselves. And that has really helped to clarify what we mean by coaching. It also helps in the psychological safety and the setup of those coaching connections, because you're often coaching with someone that you don't know or have met, but may indirectly influence your career progression. So it just helps with all of that within our context. And then following up and making sure that there's the line manager or their advisor or advocate is in that first meeting to agree on coaching goals. So really defining those coaching goals, spending time around the chemistry meetings so they've got a good, strong working alliance, and then following up on the coaching goals at the end. And one thing I would say is has really helped is making sure that it's bookended in that way.
Yeah.
So it's got a clear start, it's got a clear end, and that just helps in terms of the whole coaching experience for our people internally.
And I think going back to that point of technology, I think the best technology works in concert with the human
Yes.
element. It doesn't replace it. So we've got a coaching platform, and it is fantastic at automating a lot of the things that we used to have to do manually. But interestingly, like my L&D manager still opts to have one-to-one conversations with people for exactly the reason you've just described, Angel, of making sure that coaching is the right intervention for them at a given moment, because it's not always the most appropriate thing to kind of get into. It depends on what they want to be coached around, right? So I think technology at its best complements and enhances what we do.
And I also find that one-to-one meeting really helps me to help them define what their goals are for coaching as well. And it gets to underneath some of the initial, oh, this is what I want to work on. Actually, when we get into it, it's something slightly different. So it just helps from that part. So that would be something that does stay.
And the benefit of having a platform, you see, is that you can gather up the data and the feedback from your coachees, and then be able to report on it easily to make a business case. So going back to the point somebody asked around budget, I mean, this is how you build a case for extra investment, to say, well, this is what your money got us this time in terms of the engagement, and these are the results that we're getting. And an additional investment would allow us to do this, to do that. So I think I mean, I've been doing it for 10 years, so it's a lot of case making along the way, but it gets easier the more you do, because people can see and feel the impact. So it's not just about the figures. So I would always take it back to the human side of encouraging people to talk about their experiences, the impact it's had on them personally, and the effect it's had on teams and the organization. And once you get into that terrain, I think that's when you really start changing minds.
I'd like to add a couple of points, and I think one is culture. When you're working globally, there are going to be cultural differences into how coaching is accepted around the world. So I think it makes those conversations even more important. I think that's one thing. And the other is, if you're a well-trained coach, you know if someone's been sent for coaching, and you have to have that courageous conversation that calls it out and says, really, how invested are you in being here? Because I don't want either of us to waste time. You have to have the courageousness and the conviction of your thinking to kind of not go along with any game playing. There will be game playing sometimes, unfortunately, within coaching, and it's a question of calling it out. A lot of people are sending messages of appreciation to all of you, so I really want to thank you for being with us today. There's one final question, which is from one of our independent coaches, which is like, how do you get hired by a company? What's the routine?
Well, I've tended to find my coaches through the L&D strand. So finding practitioners who can deliver a particular session, for example. And then I've found that many of those are also coaches. So I think that's very helpful if coaches have other strings to their bow that they can offer to an organization. That would be one point I'd add.
Just kind of know your strength or your niche almost.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's through the networks as well, through the networks and introductions. Sorry, Denise.
I was just going to add to that, recommendations is big for us, definitely.
So lots of people are saying thank you, and what a great session it's been. We couldn't have done it without you investing your time and being here to share your wisdom. Our warm thanks go to all three of you. And just a bit of a final note from Christina, who says thanks, kudos to all of you for helping the world to be a better place with coaching. That's a really lovely sentiment and very pertinent given what we're facing in the world at the moment. So and yes, other people are saying thank you. Great session. I can see quite a few of our graduates have joined us, so it's always lovely to reconnect with them as well. So thank you very much. I suggest that we end the session here. Just as a reminder, it is recorded. It will be emailed to you, and we will make it available on our webinar. And you've been most generous in sharing your expertise, your wisdom and your learning along the way. So thanks to all three of you, Angel, Denise and Paul. I'm going to give you a little round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.